Before moving to Europe, I lived in Qatar, and one of the questions that people asked me the most is Qatar safe? The answer is, it depends. Really, it depends on what kind of safety you are talking about. So today, in less than 8 minutes, I will explain where Qatar is safe and where it's not. At the end of the day, it pretty much depends on your lifestyle. When I lived in Qatar, there were some things that I disliked and others that I enjoyed. However, most of what the media says, both on the positive and negative side, often doesn't match my perception and that of my friends who still reside there. The most obvious misconstruction of the media are about safety in Qatar. Some journalists paint Qatar as a hostile place, where if you say something wrong, the government will throw you into a den, and nobody's going to hear about you anymore. But it is very unlikely that this will happen. Other journalists paint the opposite image, that Qatar is a super safe place, and whatever you do, the risks are minimal. They are also wrong. If we talk about conventional violence, like gangs fighting for territory with heavy weapons like in some poor districts of Latin America, then Qatar is a very safe place. There is no such a thing there. I could leave my wallet unattended on a restaurant table while going to the toilet with no fear that someone would steal it. Here is a brief comparison of crime statistics from Qatar versus the United States. Rates are per 100,000 people per year. Homicide rate, 0.4 in Qatar versus 6.52 in the US. Burglaries, 50.6 in Qatar versus 714.4 in the US. Robbery rate, 2.6 in Qatar versus 146 in the US. Auto theft rate, 7.9 in Qatar versus 390 in the US. And now a very interesting one. Software piracy, 54% in Qatar versus 20% in the US. Bottom line, unless you are Microsoft, you should not be worrying about common crimes in Qatar, even during the night. And this is a curious aspect of Doha. See, many cities around the globe have an unofficial curfew. For example, it's really not advisable to walk across the historical downtown of Rio de Janeiro during the night. Please don't do that unless you know very well the risks you are taking. But for Qatar, and especially Doha, that is not the case. Even more, the city is more dynamic at night because during the majority of the year, the excruciating heat forces business and attractions to prefer evening hours. I clearly recall the first time I visited the renowned Souk Waqif, a large traditional Arab market in Doha. Just before noon, I discovered that almost everything was closed. Then, around 8 o'clock in the evening, bang! Every store and restaurant was open and the area was crowded. This is a city that comes to life at night. Although the daytime heat is not too bad in the winter, from December to February, I still suggest taking a tour of Doha just after sunset because there are many beautiful nighttime cityscapes and illuminated high-rise. If you want to have a drink, unlike neighboring Saudi Arabia, Qatar has places selling alcohol, but the prices, they are expensive. I made an entire video about that already, you can check it in the comment section. Another doubt that many people ask is, how safe is Qatar for women? Overall, it's safe. However, less than it would be for a man. As a man myself, I always felt very safe in Qatar. But I'm not sure a woman would have the same impression. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you will be assaulted in the middle of the streets in Doha during daylight. This is very unlikely to happen. But there are some cases of harassment in Qatar. And due to cultural differences, a lot of Western females complain about a practice called stalking, which is bad and very uncomfortable. Say that, it's much less likely a Western woman will be harassed in Doha than in Bradford in England or in Saint-Denis in France. So yes, if you are a woman, I'm pretty sure you feel safer in Doha than what would you feel in Baltimore. The same is valid for Americans in general because there is this huge concern of some Americans that they will be mistreated in Qatar due to their nationality. Qatar was one of the first nations in the world to normalize relations with the Taliban. They even have an embassy there. There are no impacts, however, on how Americans are treated. Actually, and this is something I observed when I lived there, if you are an American, you are more likely to get special treatment and help than other foreigners Many people deny that this kind of special treatment exists, but I saw it over and over again during my time living there. So now you know that even if you're a woman, or an American woman, chances are you will not be a victim of crime in Qatar. But crime is not the only kind of violence. There is another one that in many countries kill even more people, and that, unfortunately, is quite bad in Qatar. It sometimes kills entire families. This kind of violence we will talk about is spread nearly everywhere in Qatar, from the streets of Doha to the highways across the country. And unless you live and work at the same place, at some point you might be exposed to it. I'm talking about vehicle traffic violence. To understand how violent are the roads in Qatar, let's put it in perspective. For comparison, this is the percentage of deaths related to road accidents in other countries. In the United Kingdom, 0.42%. In Germany, 0.45%. In Poland, 1%. In Russia, 1.06%. And in the USA, 1.66%. Even countries with considerably violent roads like Brazil, 3.01%, have less deadly roads than Qatar. In Qatar, from all deaths, 5.05% are traffic related. Yes, you heard it right. In Qatar, 1 in every 20 deaths are caused in road accidents. Qatar is likely one of the most dangerous places in the world I have ever been for driving. There is a way to avoid these dangers in the roads of Qatar, however. But before I tell you how, I would like to ask a small favor. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. So my best advice is, if you are planning to drive during your stay in Qatar, choose places close to the newly built underground or subway system. If this is not possible and you will resort to driving, try to rent a car of a larger size with multiple airbags. Other tip I will give you is that there are some cultural aspects of Qatar that may conflict with the habits of foreign tourists, for example. Public displays of affection, common in the West, are frowned upon in Qatar, especially during the month of Ramadan. Local laws are based on Sharia, a religious Islamic code, and corporal punishment is among the possible penalties, although rarely executed. The dress code is more modest, especially during religious holidays. Pork products are not sold in supermarkets. There is only one store in the entire country authorized to sell them. And while not controlled per se, social media is monitored by authorities, and anything you write may be used as evidence. Say all that, Qatar is one of these countries that figure in our list of the best nations to start a new life with no money. But for that, you must have certain skills. If you want to check the full ranking, it is in this video here on your left. Besides Qatar, other countries to start a new life with no money are Chile, the UAE, and a surprising European nation.